Hey, what is going on, guys? It's been a while since I've done a YouTube video. I know I haven't been able to catch up to a lot of things. I've been running behind when it comes to these things because of grad school, of work, and just other personal responsibilities that I've been trying to take care of and maintain. So, anyways, today's topic I will talk about how to defeat thoughts of lust that you have, right? Now, obviously a lot of people, especially in our modern age today where I don't want to take you back throughout history and explain to you the social aspect of it, of how the sexual revolution has perverted our society, and this was largely led by feminism, obviously. But anyways, I think it takes just a quick look around you to realize that our sexuality, or I'm sorry, our society is sexually saturated, right? Overly saturated with sexual content. You see it everywhere that you go. You can't possibly avoid it unless you go and live in the middle of nowhere. But even then, those thoughts are going to come to you. The reason why that is, it's because you have a natural biological disposition to reproduce and to survive, right? And so these instincts are very old. They're hundreds of thousands of years old that have been refined through, adaptive slash evolutionary history, right? So, anyways, how do we, deal with those thoughts then? How do you try to manage this minefield of sexual perversions, or, whatever you want to call it, that's out there? Well, it starts off with the things that you focus on, right? Because despite the fact that our society is still overly saturated with sexual material, you are in control of what you choose to focus on, right? So there's still a lot of things that one can focus on that have nothing to do with sexual stimuli, right? And a lot of people overly emphasize how dangerous our society has become. And I do actually agree that our society has become worse and more decadent lately, but the problem is there are a lot of people who, especially in the church, who hyper focus on the decadence and the degradation, and they don't focus on the many positive things that are occurring in our society, especially when it comes to the gospel, reaching other people, the good news of Jesus dying on the cross and resurrecting, forgiving us of our sins, if only we put our faith in him, right? So once we start focusing on that, then our thoughts are naturally going to just stray away from those things. And we don't have to do things by willpower, because believe it or not, guys, based on the psychological data, the use of willpower is the least effective method to reduce any kind of addiction or dysfunction that you have. Willpower is a short-term method or solution that is not going to bring you long-term results that you desire. Instead, the thing that is going to bring you long-term results is, besides obviously the umbrella term, which is faith in God and being conformed to his image, it's to condition your mind and to condition your subconscious, right? So when you adopt a new identity, and when you start to obviously conform your identity to Christ's identity, then those things start to naturally go away, because Christ didn't think like that, right? So Christ was somebody who was pure. He was pure in every sense of the word. And this kind of purity is not the kind of purity that we think in our modern terms, which is this sort of naivete, this childish kind of purity that is, very unassuming, and, you don't know any better. No, it's a purity that is willful, right? It is a purity that is intentional, that is perfectly aware of the decadence that is around it, but yet chooses to not pursue that. Instead, it chooses to pursue the things that are of God. This is the real purity. purity that we think about in our culture, which is like this sort of blasé ignorance. I don't know any better, like I've never seen anything in my life. I've lived a sheltered life. That is not sustainable and that is not achievable, right? And even that kind of lifestyle, as much as so many people want to, especially when it comes to children, they want to put their children in such situations. What they fail to understand is that this is not possible to do, at least not in the long run. And it's become less and less sustainable as the time goes on, and it will be less and less sustainable as time goes on. But that doesn't mean that you become a nihilist and you start to allow yourself to be just washed completely with the culture. That is also foolish. That is actually its own form of naivete. So where you just uncritically just accept the culture and in the name of practicality. So because you don't want to rub anyone the wrong way or you want to get with the times, our mission as Christians is not to get with the times. It is to set the standard for the times by obeying the gospel and obeying the commands of God. And when you do that, guys, those thoughts, they tend to naturally just go away. And not all sexual thoughts go away. So here's another misconception that a lot of people think. They think that once you become a Christian and you are restored and you are renewed in His image, what tends to happen is you don't think about sex at all. Like sex just poof disappears out of your mind. That is not what happens, and that is not what should happen. In fact, if something like that happens, there is actually a neurological problem that you're experiencing. There are certain parts of your brain that are not functioning properly, and it's not supposed to do that. So instead, what happens is you start to think about sexuality the way God thinks about it, not the way that the culture thinks about it, right? Because when you think about sex the way that the culture thinks about it, it's going to be very difficult for you to overcome those intrusive sexual thoughts. Instead, what you need to do is once you are thinking about sex the way God thinks about it, it becomes very difficult for you to find all these artificial stimuli and the world's messages about culture the culture's messages about sexuality to be very attractive, because they don't make sense, because you have a better view of it than the world does. And so why would you discard a better view of an inferior view? So you obviously want to continue to improve and get better. So ultimately, of course, God's way is better. I don't think anybody can argue with that unless you're somebody who just doesn't believe in God and you're an extreme nihilist, and that's an exception. But we all know, once we experience the grace of God, that thinking about it like He does, thinking about anything like He does, actually tends to take care of everything. That is the primary objective that we should have. The secondary objective is obviously the more practical aspects of like, okay, what are certain places that are going to trigger me, that I'm going to avoid? Who are the people that I shouldn't be associated with because that's how they think, that's the kind of lifestyle that they engage in, so I want to stay away from those people, things like that, right? So once you start, and this, what it's going to do is it's going to shape your identity. It's going to change it, and it's going to transform it into Christ's identity. And the closer and closer you become in your identity to Christ's, the less likely you are to not just have intrusive sexual thoughts, but just to sin in general. And because you are on a mission to please the Lord, and he or she who pleases the Lord, who can stand against them, right? Like, the Lord will continue to empower you if you please Him. But if you displease Him, and the more you displease Him, the more He's going to resist you, because God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. That's what it means to be humble, guys, is to obey the Lord. To be proud and prideful is to disobey the Lord, ultimately. So hopefully this was interesting to you guys and informative, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.